My guest today is Eve Gaciarz, Assistant Director of Communications at the Yale MacMillan Center. And she's going to talk about shifting your lens from one facet of higher ed communications to another. Welcome to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager. I'm Jenny Li Fowler, award-winning social media professional, author, and podcast host, and a recognized voice across the social media marketing industry. Social media managers are navigating the wild, ever-changing world of higher ed communications, and I'm here to share the real stories and lessons behind the posts. Each episode explores the challenges, strategies, and untold moments that come with running social media accounts in today's digital landscape. Let's get into it. Eve, welcome to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I am so excited to join and be a part of the conversation.
And I should offer congratulations on your new role. That's very, very exciting. And you transitioned to a new position within the same university at Yale. How's your transition been?
It's been going great. I transitioned from the Associate Director of Social Media at the Yale School of Management to the Assistant Director of Communications at the Yale MacMillan Center. It is the center at Yale for international and area studies. So it's been really exciting. I'm learning so much. It's a really great change from kind of feeling really comfortable within the social media space and kind of the years that I've spent there, and now transitioning more to broad scale communications and getting to tap into other skill sets that I've kind of put on the back burner for a little bit. So it's been really exciting to just jump back in, and I have a real hunger for learning right now. So I'm just learning so much, and it's been great so far.
Hey, I'm all for lifelong learning, but I'm sure those social media skills are going to come in very handy in your new position as well.
Yes, exactly. I'll still be doing and dabbling in social media. It just won't be the full scope of my role as it previously was at the School of Management, but still so much fun. And I'm really happy to get down and dirty doing the strategizing and everything within the MacMillan Center.
Congratulations. You're going from managing social for the School of Business and now a research center. How do you go about sort of shifting your focus and finding your new target audience?
Yeah, it's definitely a big learning process because I definitely have the business school personality kind of in the back of my head still. So trying to reorient my framing, my thinking, and thinking of new creative ways to tap into new audiences. I think it's so interesting, especially with an international student audience. Now I'm able to bring in even more cultural perspectives and demographics and geographic learning and information into my creative work. So it's been really fun, even when it comes to other languages and things. I feel like I'm learning a lot in that space. So having to reorient from what was generally a business-oriented audience to now students that are part of all different disciplines across the university. So we have biomedical engineering to the arts and physics and things like that. So it's definitely helping me look at things with a broader perspective and understand the different stakeholders that we need to tap into when it comes to our communications and social media strategy.
So how are you doing that? Are you going sort of on a listening tour? And by that, I mean, are you just talking to a lot of people, or are you sort of doing discovery and internet research on where those audiences are? Or, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, all of the above. It's been really interesting. So one of the first days in my new role, I actually attended a few tabling events, and that was really great for actually putting ourselves out there and understanding how within our department and our center, the staff and faculty are actually talking about our brand. And
Can you tell me what you mean by a tabling event?
yeah, so we went to within Yale, it was kind of like a pop-up convention, and we had our center table put out and got to talk to students and faculty members and staff. And I kind of was just a fly on the wall during those couple tabling sessions and understood, okay, how are those directly involved with the center talking about it? What is their perception of our brand? But then also understanding, like what the student interests are. So maybe it's research, the aspects of research that are within our center. So doing a little bit of that has been helpful to just have a boots on the ground understanding of the center. but also doing online research. So looking at our competitor centers across the board and how are their audiences interacting with their brand online, what content are our competitors posting that seems to resonate well, and also doing online research and browsing through our website, talking to our program and council leaders. And again, just getting a feel and being a sponge for all the information so I can make sure that when I'm creating communications and social media marketing content, it's accurate and well representative of the center.
Yeah, no, all sounds great. And so while you're a fly in the wall and doing all of these interviews and asking questions, what are you learning about benchmarking? Because, I'm sure the benchmarks from the School of Business are probably very different from the research center. I often tell people not to compare their numbers to the flagship MIT accounts because that's just not fair. That's just not like apples to apples comparison. So what are you doing to learn about benchmarking and benchmarks?
I definitely agree that it isn't the most effective way of approaching it to compare your content and what your institution or department or school are doing to your flagship or enterprise spaces because they're all different audiences and they're all different niches. I think there's something so great about having a more niche specific area of the higher education institution
I
you're a part
agree.
of or
Hmm.
business because there's so much opportunity there to really garner a great like-minded community that's interested in the content that you're creating and could be even more impactful than just tapping into more broad scale audiences. When it comes to benchmarking, definitely, of course, reviewing analytics and performance metrics. How have things performed in the past? Did they resonate well? Was it something that maybe we could have approached this differently and getting an idea of how the school again represents itself and how the content the audience really appreciates that comes
Hmm.
from the brand. I always like to have a humanistic approach when it comes to my content development. So being able to reflect and see, okay, was that tone and that approach incorporated in past content, or is it something that maybe I can take on and introduce? Also looking at again our flagship accounts and making sure that our voice within the center is still aligned with the broader Yale community and flagship space, but understanding that we also are our own identity on campus and able to branch off a little bit from that. So staying true to the mission and values of Yale University, but not being afraid to also have our own autonomy within the institution.
Yeah, no, I love that. And how are you finding those opportunities? Because you were saying, you're looking at things that worked and what didn't work. Are you finding those places where you can capitalize on a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think it's really important, especially being so new to the center, to ask a lot of questions and be very involved with your staff and faculty members. And don't be afraid to say, hey, what is your perception? What are some key things and elements that I should know about our brand? What are some goals and priorities that you'd like to see from our social? And having those conversations one on one with program and council leads to say, hey, where do you see our brand performing best on social media and through communications efforts? And what are some things that you maybe think could have been approached differently in the past? So, not being afraid to have those conversations, I think, is also a great benchmark point because you're able to, again, understand the stakeholders and how they're interacting.
I think there's a new person in a position, or when you take on a new position, I think it's a great time to also look at some of the things that you can stop doing. Is that
Yes, I
something
agree.
that, yeah, is that something that you're looking at all?
Yeah, I'm definitely, I would say I'm a big innovator. So I'm somebody who I like to look at data. I like to get in the weeds and talk about it. But I'm also on that token taking the information that I learned and not afraid of making changes. I think even within
Great.
the social media space, it can feel a little bit intimidating and we get this imposter syndrome where like maybe we're younger or we're not as experienced or we're kind of seen as just social professionals when you know that that's not the case. And so at times it might feel a little intimidating to be like, you know what, I'm going to try this out and see if it sticks. And being in a new role, I think it's really great. My supervisor thus far is very open to change. And as I was looking for a new role and going through that transition process, I made sure that in this next position, I did find somebody who I made sure was clear. I want to be able to innovate. I want to introduce new ideas. And of course, within reason, of course, but also say, listen, I'm somebody who I like to branch out and add a little bit of a spin on things. Is that something that you guys will be open to as a candidate? And so being able to have those conversations up front, even if you are currently in a position, if that's something that you feel you want to be more innovative, having those conversations is so important because sometimes in order to stay relevant, most of the time, I should say, you really need to bring in fresh ideas and have a refreshed perspective on the content you're introducing.
Yeah, and I really like what you're saying there. I think no matter what your age is, especially in social media, I just don't think that's the gauge for being an expert. I think that if being a practitioner and being in these spaces, I think is what's more important. So I think you should have the confidence, right, to
Yes.
say you're the expert. And if there's something that you want to try, you should take ownership of saying we're going to try this. Or if you see something that's not working, at the same time, you should have the confidence to say, look, this channel is not working or this tactic is not working. And I really feel like we're going to stop doing it.
Agreed. Yeah.
I don't think people say that enough. We should just say like, this is not
100%.
working. This is not working. We should stop doing it. Right.
Yes, 100%. And actually, it's funny because when I first came to Yale, I had a wonderful team that I was working with, and it was about my second week in, and I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I felt I came from kind of a smaller private institution to obviously a more recognizable institution that's more globally acknowledged. And I remember sitting down with a colleague that I felt like I could open up to a little bit. And I shared, and I said, I'm just having so much imposter syndrome. I was sitting in a lecture and I said, I'm surrounded by all of these profound academics and I can't help but feel like, what do I bring to the table? And she looked at me, and this reframed my whole perspective. And she looked at me and she said, Eve, you are the expert in what you know. You may be sitting in this lecture hall and this individual is speaking and giving a talk about something that they know a lot about and they're fluent in. Guaranteed there's no one else in this room that knows as much about social media than you do. And that was really exactly what I need to hear in that point, because I'm like, you know what? I'm here. I got this position. Clearly, there was something about my candidacy that sparked interest and let people know that I would be a great option for what they were looking for. And so hearing that advice honestly eliminated most of my imposter syndrome at that point.
That's amazing. I'm glad that one conversation, did that for you. I mean, in all honesty, when I first came to MIT, I had imposter syndrome too. I mean, I dare you to try to find someone among us that hasn't felt that at some point in our careers. But I just to offer a little bit of a different perspective, I think for me, it was more like, I was just sort of faking it until I make, the fake it till you make it. But what I realized is I wasn't really faking it to convince anyone else. I was faking it until I convinced myself that I was the expert. It's like, it took, I had to actually own it myself and believe it myself, so sometimes everyone around you is looking to you and they know that you're the expert, but you have to own that a little bit and believe it in yourself. So, thank you for sharing your story. But yeah, for sure, I feel you on the imposter syndrome thing,
Yeah.
Okay, so you have your audience that you're trying to discover, but you still want to be aligned and you're still paying attention to the Yale flagship channels, correct? Or just sort of their strategies, right?
Yes.
Why? Can you tell us why that's important?
It's so important because obviously being a smaller, more niche area of the institution, and even back at SOM as its own college or school on campus, at the end of the day, we are all part of the broader Yale community, right? So the content that we're making, we are collaborating with other schools or departments on campus. We still have a specific tone that we need to be aware of when we're online. Obviously, again, having the autonomy to make your center department a little more distinct. But at the end of the day, when it comes to branding and having things look efficient and complementary to
aligned,
aligned with the Yale institution itself is really important. You want your content to still resonate and be identifiable and say, oh, those are Yale colors or your institution's colors or font, things like that. But also, again, showing that it's a part of it too. So paying attention to the flagship accounts is something I always try and do because it's good to see. Obviously, when it comes to social media specifically, it's kind of one of the more low-hanging fruits for audience interaction and figuring out how they're feeling about your brand. They'll most likely flock to the flagship account for that. So seeing what those conversations are looking like in the comments or in their highlights and things like that is really important.
Let's take a quick pause for a word from our sponsor. Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 33 to 35% email open rates. The impact? Personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours and not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. I also think that, part of the selling point is that you're a part of Yale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes.
You're part of that community.
100%. I think if I were to say the MacMillan Center, people would be like, what is that? But when you say Yale MacMillan Center, there's automatically kind of like a stiffening up that happens. It's like, oh,
there's
Yale.
a recognition and an affirmation. And so sometimes I don't understand why people want to drop the MIT. I'm like, the MIT isn't that's the big selling point. I'm glad that your lab or research center is very successful. But a lot of people, it's the MIT that makes it so globally recognizable. So I never understand that. Sitting from from the central office, I find that there are a lot of like labs and centers and institutes that don't have a dedicated social media manager. And coming from, the School of Business where you were like the dedicated social media manager, can you please tell people why it's important to have a dedicated social media manager?
Yes, it is so important. I think I loved how you phrased it before as a practitioner, because at the end of the day, social media is a continuously expanding opportunity for brands to really amplify their recognition online. When it comes to businesses or research and getting your information and looking as a thought leader, social media is where people are going to get that. I think I saw a statistic recently where Gen Z uses TikTok as a search engine. So knowing that there's just so much opportunity there for your brand to really grow. And I always, of course, recognize that a lot of departments or centers may not have the funding or the financial ability to be able to hire a social media person. But I think there's something to say about even in your role, if you do or do not have the opportunity to have a dedicated social media practitioner, I think it's important to set aside, 2 to 4, 6 hours, however many you think you can for social media strategizing, because there's a big difference between just taking an article that maybe your department created and posting it across every single platform and just hoping something sticks. There's another way to approach it that is much more effective, which is, hey, let's analyze our audience on LinkedIn or Instagram and see if we'll get a better reach if we really tailor it to one platform, and get good visuals or videography that can support that instead of just throwing it all out there and hoping that something lands.
Exactly. I really think that if you make an effort, or if it's a priority to be on a social media channel, I think that it should be done well, right? And I think it should there should be dedicated time to do that well. I used to really hate it when people would tell me to just throw it up on social. They don't do that, and I don't hear that as much anymore. But there'd be people that are just can't you throw it up on social? First of all, social is not a thing. Like I feel like social media is not, it's not a singular thing. Like media
Agreed.
is like plural for medium because it's just this vast thing, right? And then even if I do a post that, it takes me like a half an hour. Eve, it takes me like a half an hour to do one post,
Yes,
because like
I get it.
if you really, there's no throwing it up there, if you really want to make sure like the caption resonates, you want to make sure that the photo is right and you have alt text, like all of the things. If you really want people to look at it, that it takes a lot of time. So I remember that used to be a pet peeve of mine because I'm like, no, there's no throwing up on social,
Exactly.
like I don't even understand that. Like, is there throwing it onto the Boston Globe periodic, is that like, is that a thing? So I just think that it just takes like time and dedication if you want to do it well. Right.
Yes, it's interesting. As I was going through my transition from SOM to MacMillan, I was, of course, meeting with all of our program teams, and I had gone in and created this ginormous workspace. I should say created. I added on to my social media workspace that I already had to try and continue scheduling out content for the month after my departure. And I screen shared, and everyone on this meeting was just, their jaws were on the ground because they're like, I didn't realize all of this that's happening on the back end from like the
Wow.
social content that's being created. And it was just funny to see because I felt like I was overwhelming them because I'm like, yeah, this is my whole workspace. This is my content calendar. Here's my ideation, my timelines for things, and kind of showing them everything I had prepared. And like, I didn't realize like all of the back end that goes in because they just see most of the time the finalized post, right? Or the
Right.
draft that we send over and say, hey, does this have a stamp of approval? Can I
Mm-hmm.
post it out? But all of the ideation and the thought process and the pre-planning and everything to even just the down to the emoji that I try and think of if I'm including it on a caption, right? And which one that I want to use.
Oh my
So
gosh. The amount of time it takes me to find the right GIF
yeah.
or the right music, the
Mhm.
sound to go in the back of something, those two are such big, it just takes so much time if you want to find
Mhm.
the right one to fit your culture and the moment and all of that stuff, right? So sorry,
Exactly.
I digressed. You were
Oh no.
saying, but they were really,
No, but I agree.
for all the times that I've heard, I didn't realize. I think that's the whole thing, is that people don't realize, and that's why I'm constantly saying, as social media managers, part of our job is to educate, because people just don't know, you know all of the work in the background and the time that it takes to be a social media manager, or to put up a social media post. So
100%. I think it comes with the terrain too, because obviously social media is so fast paced. So when we're creating things, like you said, we're sitting there scrolling in our little offices over time and time again, flipping through music and sounds and things. And, 1 minute there's a sound that's trending, the next day it's gone. So it's hard to really see, as opposed to more of like an engineering role
mhm,
that's more
mhm.
project management streamlined and has all of these different components and conditions attached to it. Social media is more, we have this, it's ready to go, or we're scheduling it out. And you have to really navigate the timeline with that space. But again, people don't see the end result or don't see the beforehand. They just see the end
Yeah,
result.
the flexibility, as you mentioned, like when you say things, trends, go away the next day. I mean, you're not exaggerating. Trends fall off after 24 hours. So it's really, you do have a day.
Mhm.
Yeah. So so Eve, what what would be your recommendation, or what would be some of the priorities that you recommend for, people that transition or move from one role to another within the same campus system?
Yeah, I think it's important to take note of, if you're wanting to go through a transition, where your skills are and where your strengths are, but also recognize your weaknesses and where you want to develop. So for me, I love social. It's my bread and butter. It's something that I'll always enjoy, but I've got comfortable. I really felt like, especially my role
Mm.
as times went on, I wasn't feeling challenged, and being someone who is more so at the start of their career, I could do social every day, day in and day out, but I was realizing that there were other areas I wanted to grow within my career. And so I made a strengths and weaknesses document and I outlined,
Wow.
where are things that I perform really well and that I feel as though I could continue doing and not have to ask for, support on. And then on that same token, I created weaknesses. Where are things that I felt like I wanted to more creatively use, skills that I felt like maybe I wasn't using as much, and or even skills that I haven't learned at all, and how did I want to develop into that? And I eventually tried to then, as I was going through a role transition and kind of figuring out where I wanted my new role to be, I was in a very privileged position that, I had a job already, and I didn't have to be quick at finding something, but I could be very intentional about how I wanted to redirect my career during this time. And I tried my best to find a role, which now in hindsight, I think was a great decision, but try and find a role that was oriented towards being able to still add in some of those strengths that I have, but really focus more on those weaknesses or areas of development.
Yeah. And I think it's important for people to realize that you can transition in and out of a full-time social media management position. Um, it's possible. It's not impossible. And if you wanted, you could probably transition back in if you wanted. Well, Eve, this has been lovely, and it's been so great talking to you, and I can't let you go before I ask you, what is your confession?
My confession is that I really don't like TikTok. I feel like
Hey,
that is
you're not alone. Yeah.
I feel like it's hard because I know you have to be on TikTok, but I don't have TikTok. I've perused starting one up again, but I just feel like with Instagram, I can occasionally get like a reminder, like, okay, I've been scrolling for a long time. Like it's time to boot myself off. I really feel like TikTok is this vortex that I just, no matter what, I get sucked in and hours go by and I'm still on it.
It's so true. Yeah, it's very sticky. But also, I mean, social media managers, there are platforms we do not like. We don't like all of the social media platforms.
Exactly. And I think it's tricky because TikTok, I think, is the most fast growing and probably offers the most opportunity for brand growth engagement. But when I was at SOM, I had a student content team that I oversaw, and I let them know, and they let my supervisor know. I'm like, I don't do TikTok. I am not a TikToker. I've tried. I've definitely grown accounts on TikTok before, but personal usage, I don't think I would have been able to do as great of a job and incorporate as much strategy as I'd like because I don't want to be a consumer of the platform. So I kind of took TikTok and handed it off to my content team, to the students. And I was like, hey, if you guys want to work on your social, here's TikTok. Have fun. And they really enjoyed that.
I think that's a great answer to that conundrum. Thanks for coming onto the podcast, Steve.
Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation. You are doing such amazing work by having this platform and educating and really showing the roots and the whole root system that is the social media landscape. And just thank you for the work that you're doing and the platform you're building.
Thanks for listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed Social Media Manager. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.